Hello, welcome to this 5th lunch break webinar. Today we're going to show you how to use real-time timelines. My name is Bas Hoksbergen. I'm Architectural Market Manager at Pharos, and I'll be your host as well as presenter today. My colleague Ryan Sainsbury is present as well, though he'll be operating in the background and support where required to answer any questions or anything, or answer any questions I don't know the answer to. The aim is to have a 20-minute presentation and then a Q&A session to answer possible questions. At the bottom of your screen, you will find this button to ask any question, and also a chat window for any, let's say, more off-topic, just to say hi or to raise any type of technical question if the system is not working as it should. In there, you can raise your hand as well. That might be a way for us to allow you to speak if you might want to. Let me start off with a poll, and you should see something on your screen. I'm curious if you have ever used real-time timelines or astronomical timelines before, and I just want to chat if you can, well, if the technical quality is okay. So let me see. Yeah, most of the people have voted. Actually, quite some people have used or played with it before. That's good to know. And if you might have been joining via the browser, you will have not seen this question. Apologies for that, but that's a limitation of the software we use. So with this poll done, let's get started. Topics are pretty simple today. At first, I'll explain you a bit about the concept. I'll show an example of a real-time timeline, and then I will be adding the additional feature set of the astronomical timeline. Now, let's start with the basics. Let's say there is the question to have a simple red timeline starting at 8 o'clock and then play it till 10 o'clock in the evening and then nicely fade out in a very long 30-minute fade. There's actually 3 different ways how you can do that. Of course, the first one is that you can have an external trigger, somebody pressing a button at exactly 8 o'clock to make it start. Possible, but very likely not ideal. A second way is that you can program triggers, as you probably have done before, where you say at 8 o'clock, let me make this a bit smaller. At 8 o'clock, I want to start this timeline, and at 10 o'clock, I want to release this timeline, and I want to release this in a nice long fade of 30 minutes. Nothing wrong with this, and this is a perfectly fine way to do scheduling. But there's also another way to do scheduling, or indirect scheduling, to be sure to play back the right content at the right moment, and that's using a real-time timeline. Now, how does that work? I'm going to make a new real-time timeline, and this is giving me a 24-hour timeline matching the hours of the day. In this, I can simply program when I want something to start. Let's say in this case, 8 o'clock in the evening, and I can just simply type 20H to say 22-hour, 8 o'clock, make it stop at 10 o'clock in the evening, and fade out in 30 minutes. Now, if I start this timeline, it will simply always play back at the right moment, or at the exact time it is at that moment. Let me show you how that works. Let me maybe check, because I'd made another timeline before, which is pretty similar. I'm going to say, upon startup, I want you to play back this real-time timeline I just created. Let me upload this in the controller. And let me open up the web interface, or maybe said more correctly, open up a snippet from the web interface. And you see this timeline starts to play at 13:06, which is, I'm in the Netherlands, exactly the time of the day right now. Let me maybe just show that. The controller says at the moment it's 13:06. The timeline is playing back exactly at that moment in time. Just to show you, when you are working with real-time timelines, you can also see that when you're going to the Manage menu, select that timeline. You can see the time source. It's not longer using the internal clock, but it's using the real-time to define where in the timeline to play back. Now, let me go to an example where this comes in very handy. And this is the first example. Let's say there's a customer request who has 20 RGB spots along his facades, and he wants to have 6 shows with a basic color, red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow. And he wants that to start at 8 o'clock, off at 11 o'clock, and at every 0.30, he wants to see a 5-minute sparkle. And every time that show should have slightly different, less saturated sparkles. Let me show you what I mean. I don't want to save that. Go to designer. So 6 shows show the primary color with a sparkle on top of that. If I would to do that without real-time timelines, and I want to match the requirement that at any given moment the customer can press this other button to start the right show, will probably end up like this. I have a very simple timeline for the base color. I have a timeline for this first 5-minute sparkle, for the second sparkle, which is slightly more saturated, for the third effect, etc., etc. And I need to do that for all the different background colors, for all the different effect sparkles on top of it. The triggering becomes pretty complicated because at the moment he presses a button to change the content, it needs to start the show. For all the real-time triggers, it needs to match which of the specific buttons is down. It's getting complicated very quickly. Using real-time timelines in this particular case is a great example to show you the power of real-time timelines. Now let me. In this show file, again, I'm still trying to meet the same customer request. I made 6 real-time timelines. You see they're all using the real-time as trigger, and they're all, I can actually zoom out a bit, they're all going from midnight to midnight. On all these timelines, I always made sure that they start at 8 o'clock, they end at 11 o'clock, and every 30 minutes I have these sparkles programmed. I have that done for all the different colors. So I simply have 6 timelines matching the 6 shows the customer wants to see. On the trigger tab, I've got for the 6 buttons that the customer has, every time it's stopping the other timelines and playing simply that one timeline. Let me upload this in the controller. Let me go here, show you 2 additional things, show you the timeline status, and let me be sure I refresh this to show correctly. Let me show the 6 buttons I programmed. So these are all snippets from the web interface, but in order to make it show slightly right, I put it at a certain, I position this all within the same screen. And over here is a simulator I'm using to show what the system is doing. Now, if I would play back this real-time timeline at this very moment, as you can see, the output is completely dark because there is indeed nothing playing. Now let me adjust the time from the controller to 8 o'clock in the evening. Or let me do something like this. I can see that at the moment I adjusted the controller's time, the timeline jumped to the right position, matching that exact time. Now I can press any button I want, and it's simply toggling between any of the selected timelines. And every timeline, when I select it, it doesn't start to play from the beginning, but it will always play the exact moment in time I wanted it to play. Let me maybe select a part of the timeline where it had a simple show, so just 1 minute after 1. Let me maybe show that here. Green timeline at 1 minute after 1. Zoom in a bit more. At 1 minute after 1, it's playing the green with the white sparkles on top of it, or actually slightly green sparkles on top of it. If I would now jump to another timeline, you can see it directly jumps to the right timeline and starts to play it back at the exact right moment. This is a useful example where real-time timelines really help you to keep overview of what you're trying to program and keep overview of how it's all looking. Also, when you look to the web interface, you can directly see, there's this one show playing, and all these different elements that are playing on top of it are just part of the show. I would say so far, so good. And possible questions I will answer at the end. I think that's probably easier. Now, a second question. We have another customer, same type of installation, 20 RGB spots. At 5 o'clock in the morning, he wants to slowly fade up to red, where it should be at 8 o'clock, it should be red. At 7 o'clock, it should be blue. And at 10:30, it should be black again. Let me open up this show file, project file, I should say. 1 second. Here we go. So in the exact same style how we did it before, this is how this timeline will look. I can play this back, everything good. But as you often have it, customers, they tend to, while you're working with them, they might mean something slightly different. So actually, in this case, the customer comes back and saying, yeah, but I don't want it to be at 9 o'clock red. I want it to be when it's sunrise. I want it to be red. And exactly during sunset, I want it to be blue and then slightly fade out. Now, that's an interesting question, because when you have a timeline, of course, at sunset and sunrise times vary over time. So somehow I need to, fade faster or fade slower. And we can do that. And let me show you how. But before we do that, let me show you this project. This imaginary project is in Amsterdam. And I've opened up a website, just simple Google will get you there. This is showing me the exact sunrise and sunset times in Amsterdam, so where this project is based. And I can move my mouse over it, and here at the bottom, it's saying exactly when the sun sets and when the sun rises. And when I hover over this, I can easily see for this location what is my earliest sunset time and my latest sunset time and my later times. And for this project, for this location, these are the times I need to keep in my mind. In the summer, the sun rises at 5:15, and in winter as late as 8:50. And for sunset, you can see the times on the screen as well. Let me go back to this one. So we know actually the customer request is set at 5 o'clock, start from black, then go to sunrise at any moment between 5 to 8:50. Now, from a real-time timeline, I can put astronomical events by clicking the little sun over here. When I click this, I can say, what do I want to add? Well, let me use sunrise in this case. And I don't want any offset to sunrise. I add this. When I add this, I get this special element on my timeline. And this special timeline says, play against real time until you start this first part. Then whatever is programmed, let me maybe show it like this, whatever is programmed in this section under it, play this back faster or slower until sunrise. And then after that, play back from sunrise till, in this case, 9 o'clock, play back this section. So you are sure that always at 9 o'clock, you play exactly this section from the timeline, and then follow real time again. So if I'm able to drag this around, and let me position this to match my project. I want this to be at 5 o'clock. Oh, I want it to be 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, I always want it to be black and I want to start. Then I want to go to sunrise, which is, well, you know, I position it somewhere on the timeline. It doesn't really matter where I position it, as long as I'm sure that I position it between 5:15 and 8:50, where the actual sunrise will be happening. Then actually I'm just going to extend this part, because I'm going to put another waypoint, as we call it, on this timeline, which is sunset. Let me add this, and let me put the default sunset around 7 o'clock, and make sure that this timeline ends is at 22 and 30 minutes. Right now, I programmed this timeline as the requirements on the back, on the right. At 5 o'clock, it's doing nothing till 5 o'clock. Then it starts to play. It will fade. Oh, this was 8 o'clock. 1 second. It will fade up to red till the moment of sunrise. Then between sunrise to sunset, it's fading from red, following you, to blue. And then at the end, I'm fading out from sunset to black. Let me open up, am I saying it right? Yes, let me open up another file, which is exactly what I've just done, what I've done before. And no, I don't want to save the changes, but this might help to explain it a bit better about what's happening. This is exactly the timeline I just showed you. So how will this play back? In winter, this is approximately the actual sunrise time in winter. This is the sunrise time in summer. So if I play this timeline back and it's winter, this is how it will look. Equally, if I'm playing it back in summer, this if I play this back in summer, sorry, I should have prepared this, but I seem to have forgotten that. Here we go. So this is how it looks like in winter. In winter, the timeline will start to play back, and around 9 o'clock, it will be fully red. At 4:30, it will be fully blue and then fade out in a very long period. In summer, it's looking like this. It will be, the red will be at sunrise, so it will be much earlier than before, and sunset will be much later than, will be at the end of the day. Now let me upload this to the controller, because when I upload it to the controller, I can show you maybe even a bit better how this operates. I've just uploaded this into the controller. Let me refresh and show to the correct times. 1 second while I get this all set up. Now, at the moment, maybe just to clarify, I am only going to play back this timeline. These other ones I made to show you, but those are not actually used in the project at the moment. There's only one time playing. On startup, I am playing back this timeline using this day curve. Now, if I am playing this back, and let's assume, as it is at the moment, it is winter, and I am playing this back early in the morning. Sunrise in the morning is around 8:50. So you can see if this timeline, sorry, let me upload this to the controller to show it correct. Right now I'm simulating that it's today, but it's around 9 o'clock in the morning. If I am playing this back, you can see the time, the part of the timeline the controller is playing is different than the actual time. And that's making perfect sense, because remember, when we go back to the timeline, it is now taking this piece of time and playing it back slower than it should be, to be sure the sunrise is actually matching the time of day. So today, the sun rises at about 9 o'clock, so it's going to play this back slower. And you can also see this back in the timeline where it's saying rate adjusted. If I would now play back again at this exact same timeline, but play it back in summer, let's say I want to play it back around 9 o'clock again. I'm adjusting the time. I just need to upload it to the controller again to be sure this is looking good. If I'm playing this back in summer, you see it's already showing pink at the same moment in time. Why is that? Of course, sunrise and sunset are different across the year. And in the summer, it will play back this first part of the timeline much faster. It can be a bit of a tricky one, this one, to get your head around how it's really operating. And it can be confusing to see a different time on the web interface. But this is actually quite helpful to make you understand what it's doing right now. I can see the time the controller is at. It's at 10 minutes to 9. But I can see, because I'm using a real-time timeline, the element of the timeline it's currently playing, it's about 10:21, which is this pink issue, as you can see in the simulator. This was the thing I wanted to show you today. I can very well imagine there are questions, and I see some on the side. So let me read those and get back to you. The first question is, in the event of daylight savings time clock changes, how do transitions occur during the time change? Let me read this further. Well, the Pharos controller is aware of daylight savings time. And let me maybe just show that here. When you select a location, it is setting if it has a daylight savings rule and when that is happening. If you want, you can set this completely manually as well. If I am correct that every day the controller calculates the sunrise and sunset times. So if you have a timeline like this, every time at midnight, it's figuring out what is my actual time to use, and will play back accordingly using the correct times. And yes, there will be a jump of sunset because just like it's on your calendar, when daylight savings time is entering, there will be a shift happening. So depending where you are, let's say it's mid-October, the last day of summertime, this might take 3 hours. The first day of wintertime, this will only take 2 hours to play back. I must say that if you might program a lighting show from 0 o'clock to 3 o'clock at night, how that might be influenced by this, I don't know for sure. I would need to test that. And I hope, James, that this answers your question. Because I mean, the controller knows what days it is. It's always using the astronomical times and the time clock savings, how you programmed it. The exact moment of change, I don't know if it's just going back 1 hour in time, or if maybe the time adjustments are only happening at midnight in our controller and not at the exact moment in time. I would need to further check that. I see another question. Can you use live control for programming without regard to the actual time using real-time timelines? That's a very good question. Yes, you can use live output. And how it would work in Simulate is the easiest way. I start to play it. I'm going to turn output live on. Let me share the right screen. My apologies. This is probably easiest. Now, the simulator I'm using at this moment does not react to real time, but if I would have actual lights connected, of course, they would react. The easiest way is to simply start to play the timeline, turn output live on, and put your cursor to where you want to show how it looks. Alternatively, in the simulate window, you can very much ramp up time, 60 times the speed. So now every minute of content is being showed within a second of time. And if I would right now, well, I would still need to have a little bit of patience, but I can see like this in what is then in 24 seconds, it will take me through Is that right? 60 seconds. Yeah, so it will take a bit of time to jump through the complete day, but I can simulate how my daylight curve will work. Let me know, by the way, if this answered your question or not. In case not, please feel free to prompt that. I see one more question regarding timeline light shows. I want to create sparkles with fading background, 2 colors. How do I create that? I want to create sparkles very slowly. Well, that's a good question, and let me try to think which timeline I'm going to use for that, or which show. And I think I'm going back to this one. The way how, and this, Ryan, please stand by because you might need to jump in here. But if I am right, the way how sparkles are created is that sparkles are by definition relatively fast. And I'm just going to figure out the easiest way to demonstrate this to you. I think this will be like this. For sake of argument, I'm not using a real-time timeline at the moment, and I'm just starting the timeline with the sparkles. Timeline, hold at end. Let's see if this is actually working. I'm pretty sure that if I set the speed of this to be very slow, that it will still show relatively fast. Let me double check. Oh, sorry, I was wrong. With sparkles, if you want to do slower sparkles, simply change the period to make it go slower. And when it comes with layers on top, I'm happy to further talk about this, but I think this will be a bit tricky to do for me to understand this in this webinar setting. At this moment, I cannot see who sent in that question, but please contact us via support@firehousecontrols.com, because I'm pretty sure we can do what you want it to do, but I need to understand your question better. Then I think in a one-on-one session, that will be easier to answer. I also see that the time is pretty much used. Are there any other questions at this moment? And I think there might not be. Again, as mentioned, if you have any questions, you can always, oh, the QA. Yeah, no, they all seem to be covered. You can always reach out to us via support@firehousecontrols.com. Yeah, with this, I'd like to thank you for your attention. There will be a small survey afterwards. We're very interested to hear your feedback. Also possible questions or other topics you have for future webinars. We would be interested to hear from you. With this, I'm ending this webinar. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I really hope to see you next time. Bye.